Well, happy Thursday, everybody. Exciting to be here. I think this is going to be a super interesting conversation. So today in our Plan 2025 with Us conversation, we're talking about how to maximize outsourced relationships. So I feel like pretty much every marketing department in the world just finalized budget and is looking at next year and allocation and resources and all of that, which is an exciting time because you're thinking ahead about what you can achieve in the new year. But did I just blink?
Yeah,
my internet just.
You froze.
Am I still here? Okay. Can you hear me now? There we go. It's coming back. So we're going to talk about outsourcing. So I'm excited to be here today with one of my dear friends and wonderful business partners. Gosh, we've worked together for 3 years at least.
At least. Yeah, I think we probably just hit our 3-year anniversary.
Yeah, probably just hit our 3. We should celebrate. So I'm Joy, I'm the owner of Winsome Marketing, and Briana is here today as our featured expert. And so I'm excited to hear from you because obviously you have tons of experience managing outsourced teams and you do it really well, which is not something everybody does. So so you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your role, and then I'll let Lauren introduce herself before we dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Briana Kuhlman. I am a senior digital marketing manager at Trax Technologies. I've been with Trax. I hit my 3-year in September, so I think we started working together shortly after I came on to the team at Trax. And I'm currently a team of 1, so I leverage Winsome Marketing and along with a couple other outsourced vendors for getting some of the more technical things done at Trax that I just don't have the bandwidth and expertise to even know how to do. So that's why we're here to talk about how we get that done.
Yeah, awesome. All right, Lauren, you want to give a quick intro?
Yeah, of course. I'm so happy to be here and chat with you, Briana. And definitely don't sell yourself short. Trax is like a global company with so many people, so many complex operations, and you handle the whole marketing side of everything really beautifully and with so much grace. So super happy to talk to you today. And I'm Lauren, and I lead our content team over here at Winsome Marketing. And I work with our clients very closely on managing their projects and ensuring, timelines are what they need to be, and that content quality is always top notch.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, definitely. Briana has lasted through so much change and volatility, but I know that it's becoming more and more common for there to be these very lean teams, right? So as we were talking at the beginning about budget allocation, I feel like more and more executives are going like, do we need all these? Staffing is the number one expense, right, of any department. And so definitely know that there are executives who think that way and who are thinking that way, especially as technology continues to develop. And so I think it's important for us to, candidly think about the pros and cons and difficulties and advantages of outsourcing and what you should and what you shouldn't and all that. So let's talk a little bit. So our goal today is to kind of unpack, Briana, how you think about leveraging outsourced teams, like you said, and then, to kind of just showcase that thinking publicly so that other people who are in similar situations, right, who are solo marketers in their department or who have lean teams, can also think critically about the advantages and challenges of outsourcing and how that all works in the real world. So let's talk a little bit about the prioritization. So, you can't outsource everything or the business doesn't run. And so what is, to your thinking, like, what is the balance? What do you prioritize outsourcing versus insourcing? What would you say are like your highest priorities to keep and then your priorities to give away? And just what's your general thinking on all of that?
Yeah, I have to ask myself like what the business needs are, what are our goals for sales and marketing and just growth overall, and what marketing tactics are best going to support those goals, right? And then I also have to think about what are my skill sets, what am I best at, and also like what do I enjoy doing most? I'm a team of 1, so I have to make sure that the tasks that I'm keeping on my own plate I actually like doing, because I can't afford to be miserable as a team of 1. So I think that's kind of the mindset I take. And the first thing that comes to mind as making the most sense to outsource is content, because it's a very technical thing. And I don't have the skills to write content at scale. So that's like the easiest thing for me, top of mind to outsource right off the bat. And then hand in hand with content is SEO, which is another very technical thing. So it just makes sense to outsource those two things together.
What would you, oh yeah, go ahead, Lauren.
I was just saying, I really love what you were talking about of, keeping the tasks that you find joy and fulfillment in. And I think that's a really underutilized thing to think about if you're just a solo person on a marketing team, right? It's like, no, I'm going to keep the things that I know I can absolutely excel at. Like, I rock at this. I'm so good. I don't want to outsource this because I can showcase my skills and bring a lot of value to the business. So I think there's that really beautiful overlap between like what you're awesome at and then also like what the business needs. And so I just thought that was really cool.
I realize like not every team has the luxury to do that. Sometimes you just have to outsource what you have to outsource. And I do really enjoy SEO. I think it's very cool, but I just don't have the time to really dig into it and get very technical with it.
Mm-hmm. So what are the things then that you would say maybe you personally, but also like broadly as a recommendation, like if you're a team of one, what do you have to keep? Like what can't you outsource?
I would say I work so closely with the sales team. So anything that's related to like lead generation or demand generation and handing leads off to the team. And that's closely tied with how leads come in through our website. So website operations, things that when something happens or something comes in that we need to jump on really quickly, I don't have time to then like outsource that task or have that like, time between communicating to my outsourced vendor what needs to be done. I need to hop on those things right away. So anything, I guess, that is more timely, that would require action right away, I would say keep those things close to you and on your plate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes good sense. Talk to me about like so, we are a vendor for you guys that we specialize in SEO and content, right? Mm-hmm. Like, is there a tipping point? Because I know like mega agencies come with the mega agency price ticket, right? So there's a cost consideration. Like, what are those kind of thresholds where you say like, I need a specialist for this, or I should just have an outsourced marketing department? Like, at what point do you kind of think through the division of all that, especially as you thought through this year, like, okay, budgeting and resource allocation and all that?
I think that I go to what can we scale quickly with, and that content generation, to hire someone new and train them in and onboard them and get them familiar with your voice and how you write and how you want to write. That takes time, and there's like a world full of expertise and specialized writers out there that you can tap into immediately, and they can jump on board. You can get connected with someone, for me, like in logistics and supply chain, that's already familiar with the industry and doesn't take that time to get caught up. So outsourcing that entire operation, like writing, SEO, content, just makes the most sense for me.
And then you have people. So what else do you outsource? You outsource PPC, ad management?
PPC, yep, which is another thing that's very technical. Like these things could be someone's full-time job. So I don't have the time to try and do each of these things at like partial capacity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes good sense. So it's kind of self-assessment of skill, right? Like, is it a specialization that's so important that you can't not do it? But then also, I mean, how would you say you kind of divvy up thinking through like the time it takes you to manage an outsourced partner versus the time it would take you to manage an in-house employee, all of that? Is that part of your decision-making process?
Yeah, it is. I think that just finding someone that I can trust, and like we have those first onboarding conversations, and if they can prove to me that they understand like our goals, the voice that we're trying to relay through like our communications and our content, then I can be sure that it's going to take less time to for me to review what they're providing and what they're writing, and just make both of our lives more efficient.
Yeah, and that you wouldn't have to worry about project managing every element of that process. I feel like that's such a huge win when you can find a team that you trust, because you're like, okay, I don't have to build a whole system around writing, editing, publishing, whatever it might be. I know this team can kind of do that for me. So that frees up so much of, your brain space and your time.
And part of the trust comes from also leaning on their expertise for new and fresh ideas, staying on top of what the new trends are, and just being able to leverage their expertise from that vantage point as well.
Yeah, I think that I want to talk a little bit about having a good outsourcing relationship, right? Having a good vendor relationship. It's interesting. I feel like we talk about this internally, we're on two sides of this conversation, right? You have to manage vendor relationships, and we are a vendor who has to be managed. And there are a variety of ways that does or doesn't work. And so I think it's an interesting relationship. I think it's one that a lot of people in your role, Briana, don't think about as a skill. But managing vendors is a skill that you have to develop. And you can't just hire somebody who knows what they're doing and then be like, cool, they know what they're doing, I'm going to blindly trust them. Because not even if they were the highest integrity in the world, they're still not looped in then to what you were saying from the very beginning of this conversation, the broader business goals and your objectives and the things that you're held accountable for and all of that, right? So there becomes then this disconnect. And for us, that's when we watch the vendor relationship deteriorate, is when we're distant from what's going on in the business and just kind of out here functioning in our own world. We know that's a huge red flag from our perspective, because we're easy to cut. We're not aligned or whatever. So let's talk a little bit about what makes an effective outsourced relationship. And let's start, Briana, with your role, how you see yourself in an outsourced relationship in terms of managing a vendor and staying on top of things, what's important to you, all that. Let's start there.
Yeah, I see myself most of my day is a lot of project management and vendor management. And the basis of all that is just solid communication and open communication, and making sure you have a consistent cadence with your vendors. Make sure you're touching base on a consistent basis. I find that for some things like content and SEO, weekly makes the most sense, but for PPC, maybe bi-weekly or monthly is just fine. It's all about making sure that I'm making the best use of my time, because I am managing all these relationships, but also managing the internal relationships with our stakeholders and our sales team. So it's trying to find that right balance, right? And then effectively communicating between the two. So if we're doing something different with SEO, I need to be able to effectively communicate why we're doing that back to our stakeholders and make sure that they're bought in and understand exactly why we're doing things the way that we're doing them.
And I know I put so much of that on the vendor as well, for I think it is the vendor's job to show up for their client in a way of I know what your goals are. So and if I don't, I'm asking those questions on a regular basis. We're talking okay, it's a new quarter. What are we focusing on? What are your goals? How can we support it? It's, giving detailed reporting and actually having conversations so that it empowers, our customers to be able to actually have those conversations effectively. So I definitely think it's for sure communication on both sides, and just asking the right questions and being willing to go in there and actually, have those conversations.
Yeah, I think finding a vendor that does ask questions and is curious and isn't just there to take orders from you is very important. When I say I'm a project manager, I don't mean that I just give orders to my vendors. I really do see them as part of my team, and I rely very heavily on them to come to me with suggestions and ideas on how to, scale things for growth and just bring new, fresh ideas to the team.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about scoping. So I don't know if you know this, Brianna, but in the agency world, we have something called scope creep. And it is the death of our business. So, expectations and rules, I think, can be really challenging. And I would guess that from where you sit and from your perspective, they're challenging because you have nobody else, right? As a department of one, like if you need something done and you can't do it, the people who you've outsourced things to are your only option, right? Mm-hmm. They're your person power. So I get that, but I also would say, like, so candidly, working with you for 3 years, I don't think you've ever asked for something that I would be like, freaking Brianna, like, like, sure. I really don't think and that's not the case with all of our clients, right? And we love our clients, but I don't feel like you try to scope creep, right? Like, it's like clear, like, okay, here's our relationship, here's the division of duties. If you ask us to do one extra thing, you usually take something else off or give us flexibility on timelines or things like that. So how much of that is just you being like an aware person with a good EQ, and how much of that is like an intentional management decision?
I think it's mostly intentional, mainly because a lot of my, like, say, last minute requests or things that would maybe change the scope of our working relationship are coming from internal stakeholders like the sales team or the leadership team. And it's up to me to make sure I'm managing those expectations. Like, if they ask for something that is like urgent, it's up to me to, manage, like, this isn't possible, or like, let's think about what we're asking here before I go to our outsourced parties and ask them to drop everything, change the entire scope of their workload, and focus on, what our needs are. So I think it's difficult because sometimes you have to have hard conversations with stakeholders, but it's an important part of managing the relationship. You're kind of like stuck in the middle and that middleman.
Mm-hmm. I love hearing just that you have more of that proactive communication style as opposed to that reactive. I think that a lot of times when, just like we're in marketing, right? So things change all the time, and we do have to be very agile and reactive sometimes, but the over reliance on that way of thinking, I think, can delve into chaos super quickly. And so when we can be proactive and when we can say, I'm making a discernment here that now is the time for me to push back because this makes sense for the long run or what our strategic goals are, whatever it might be. So I feel like it comes back to that, right? That understanding what your strategic goals are and picking your battles wisely.
Right. And I think another thing I've found that is helpful is actually introducing some of the key stakeholders to who you're working with from your outsourced partner. And that helps instill that trust. And they, are able to put a face to the name. They're not just seeing you as a line item on the budget. And we've done that on a number of occasions, and I think it's really helped.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's easy to demand things when it's dehumanized, so I think humanizing it usually can then clarify, like, oh, okay, this is a person. I think that the expectation setting is really key, and it's something that we as vendors have to always be mindful of, right? Like, I have to have a lot of self-control because when I go in as an outsourced partner, I see that as my company and my responsibility. And I don't think of myself as not a W-2. Like, it's like with Credible or with Trax or whatever. Like, I'm like, these are my businesses. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I pretend like they're like my full-time jobs. Like, I think about them all the time. So I have to be careful because, like, in certain vendor management relationships, like with you or with some of our, other clients, like, it's super healthy and they will draw the boundary for me. Like, I don't have to constantly be resetting a boundary to be like, no, I can't do that. No, I can't do that. And I think people underestimate sometimes, like, how hard it is for a vendor to say no. Like a good vendor, like a good-hearted vendor who's like, this is my company, this is my client, like, I love them, I want to take care of them, whatever. It is really hard to say no, and to say no a lot. right? And to be like, I can't get to that, or I can't get to that for 2 weeks, or that's outside the scope of work. So what do you want me to switch off? You know, and that kind of thing. And so I think it's a skill that we have to have, though, because, and I honestly don't think I developed it until I had a team, right? Because it was like, you can run me ragged, no problem. But then it's like, okay, but wait, you want to cross Lauren? Oh, wait, you want to take advantage of Ross? Like, then I was motivated to be like, okay, I can't set this precedent of like unbridled access. I'll do above and beyond, over delivering, all of that, because it becomes a problem for other people. And that's, you know, not healthy. So I think it is a skill that vendors have to have as well, right? Like, here's the scope of work. Let me remind you of that. If you want to change it, cool. But it can't just be endlessly flexible, right? Like, we're not staff. And so we can't respond like staff to everything that's asked of us. Is that fair, Lauren?
I think it's a huge challenge. It's a huge challenge depending on the type of relationship that you have, and I think the type of contract that you have, because sometimes it's easier to fall into the like staff-like mentality when you just have, let's say, a bucket of hours. Like, you are hiring an agency for 40 hours a month, let's just say, but there's no other defined scope from that. You just like get time. Then it's very challenging because nothing is out of scope, right? In that kind of relationship, you're like, it's just open-ended. So yeah, having those conversations up front and expectation setting in the beginning. And then I think the first time it happens, because usually it's not intentional.
Mm-hmm.
And like, we work with so many incredible people. There's not one person who would intentionally try, I think, to cross the line in a relationship. So it's just coming at it from a place of grace and saying, hey, actually, I don't have capacity to do this. I'd love to help you out in a week when the hours reset, or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
That's important.
You have to have a DTR, right? To find the relationship. Actually, I don't work with you. Yeah, I think that's usually helpful. So as we think about so we kind of talked a little about just the nature of the relationship, defining the relationship, clearing expectations, all that kind of stuff. Talk to me a little bit about like what makes a great vendor partner for you, Briana. Like, what are you looking for when you go to outsource these key functions? And they are key functions, right? Like, these aren't little things. These are huge parts of what you do.
I would say visibility into what they're doing in performance. It really helps me to have like a shared, I feel like I use Google Docs or Google Sheets for everything, but that having that visibility into like dashboards and metrics is very helpful for me. And again, like the proactiveness of having the vendor think about things strategically, like I'm providing the strategic direction, but using that direction to proactively like think of new ideas, fresh things to try, and coming to me with those ideas. Not everyone is going to be a winner, but I don't always have time to think like that, planning that far ahead. So I really appreciate that, and all of my vendors do that for me, which is great. I think transparency too, like if there's something that I think is really great that we're currently doing that is actually not super great, I appreciate you letting me know and saying like, hey, let's think about trying this differently, or this is just really not going well. Let's pivot and do something else. Just open communication, really. I can't stress it enough. I think that it's just, you need it.
Agreed.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I also think honoring your commitments is critical for vendors. Like, if you say you're going to do something, you should do it. I think that there are a lot of just people who I've worked with in the past, or in general, a lot of, this kind of thing happens in the workforce where, you say, okay, I'll get something to you by end of day, and then 3 months go by. Never hear from them again. I just think that happens all the time because we get busy. But really honoring what you say you're going to do and sticking to that sounds so simple, but it makes a huge difference. And if you can't get to something, proactively communicating about it. Like, I'm sorry, I fell ill. Like, I cannot get this to you. Most people have empathy and compassion if you are, as you said, communicating openly.
Yeah, absolutely. And Joy, you said something earlier about like how you really feel like these are your companies or you work for these companies. And I think that that makes my heart warm, because that makes me feel like you really care and you have our best interests in mind. So finding a vendor that really, really cares, you're not just, a paycheck or an invoice for them, making the relationship meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so too. And it's not just because we've become friends over the years. Like, I truly feel that way. And I feel that way about everything, right? I feel that way. Like, the results are on me, right? Like, I had to have a talk with somebody on my team yesterday, like, we've had this problem persist and we've told the client about it like 3 times over the course of the past like 3 months in a report. And I was like, enough, stop telling them about it and go fix it. Like, that's all we have to do is go. Like, I don't care if it's out of scope. I don't care. Like, because at some point the results are on me. Right. It doesn't matter what excuses I can offer as to why something didn't happen. Like, we're still held accountable, and I want to hold myself accountable before somebody else has to. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I think that that's an important part of just being a good partner in a business relationship. I think another element of communication that I've really been working on, I was literally talking to Chris about this morning, is like being bold enough to notice, to see things that go wrong or to see failures and be the one to call it out. Mm-hmm. So it's like, we set strategies based on a lot, right? Based on data, based on education, based on what we know will work, projections, all this kind of stuff, right? But sometimes, I mean, this is marketing, right? We do thoughtful experimentation. And so there are times when things don't work. And I think the better you get at using data, the easier it is to present data in ways that make you seem faultless. But I think that is a huge trap for especially outsourced partners, because you're kind of controlling the narrative, right? We're putting together the SEO reports or whatever. So there's this temptation to be like, well, I don't want to get in trouble. And so I'm going to present the data in a way that doesn't maybe highlight this part of something that didn't work or whatever. Apart from being fundamentally unethical, in my opinion, it's a problem because it ultimately undermines the long-term trust, right? Like, I'm not here to churn and burn clients. I'm here to build long-term outsourced relationships that build that client's business. If that client's business grows, guess what? So does my engagement with them. Like, my whole philosophy around being an outsourced partner is predicated on that idea. And so our utmost goal is to bring success, which means we have to be ruthlessly honest. And so when we notice things that are wrong, we have to be bold enough to say, that didn't work. I'm going to find out why, and we're going to change accordingly. Like, I feel like just it betrays short-term thinking and perhaps dubious ethics to have an outsourced partner who's presenting you with reports that feel like they're missing things, reports that are always positive. Like, that doesn't make any sense, right? This is marketing. We ebb and flow. And so I think it's part of our kind of ethical responsibility as the specialists, as the people with direct access to the data and the experience to know what the data says, to bring problems, right? To bring the things that didn't work, to make sure we point your attention to the ways that we need to improve something or things that are broken and all of that. And that takes some boldness, right? Because at the end of the day, it's our paychecks, right? Like, our relationships with our clients as vendors impact our revenue. But yeah, I don't know. I've been thinking through that a lot. And I think that it's such an important part of having a good vendor relationship.
And from my perspective, that's turns into a really big benefit for me, because you have other clients and you're doing a million other projects with other clients. And when you see something that either is or is not successful, that benefits me, because you can then come and say, hey, we did this with so-and-so, was really great. Let's try it out. Or maybe you're trying something with Trax and it's not so great, and that will help benefit, you and another client. So I think that's just outsourcing in general is you're opening your world up to like having these other experiences, not necessarily like with your company, but being able to leverage those experiences that the vendor is doing with other companies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this line of conversation is so interesting because today's Thursday. Okay, 2 days ago, when I was teaching the SEO 101 course, we were talking about SEO reports and how to actually present that report. And one of the things I harped for way too long on is that you can't just say what's working, because that's so, well, it's just flat and one-dimensional. And I like to put things in a story perspective. I'm like, every story has stakes. What good story is just one-dimensional? You can't think of anything. So I'm like, you need the highs and the lows, because it's going to improve your own critical thinking too, of how am I looking at this data? How can I take this, what's not working, and turn it into something good through like, okay, I'm going to stop this effort, or I am going to double down my efforts on this other thing that I know is working. It just allows you to think much more critically and absolutely develop better relationships. So I love that we're having this conversation, because truly it was like 2 days ago.
Yeah, and I think SEO is such a good example of like that scenario because of the ebbs and flows in it. You know, it might look really negative, but there's some good nuggets to uncover from like why the change.
Yeah, and if I were to say, I mean, so we are unfortunately often brought in to a company after they have left another SEO agency or after they've left another marketing agency. And so we inherit all the collateral and all the assets. And I'm very cautious. I don't ever want to paint anyone with a bad brush or, you know, come in negative. But I would say that the experience ranges from like, this was a little bit gray to like straight up, they've been duping you. Like, what have they been doing? And so that's where I think like, I think that reality exists. And I think it gives a lot of outsourced partners a bad name. I think it creates a lot of mistrust, right? And, you know, perhaps can skew people's decisions about whether or not to outsource. And certainly not everyone's that way. But the productive thing we can do with that as vendors, obviously, is to say, like, I'm not going to be that way, right? No matter what, right? I'm going to always be leading with honesty and truth and all of those things. But I do think there is, you know, a huge challenge. And I think that challenge gets bigger the more complex the role of your outsourced partner. So like, it's really hard as like a content writer for me to go evaluate the performance of a web developer. This is not what I do. I don't know enough about it to be like, this is a good web developer, this is a bad web developer, other than what they make, right? And then I can be like, yes, that looks good or that looks bad. Like, it's such a surface level analysis because that's not my skill set. And so I think, you know, for you, Briana, thinking about managing multiple outsourced partners in all of these hyper specialized disciplines, like that only gets harder the more technical some of these sub areas of marketing become, right? The more reliant they are on technology and all of that.
Yeah, I think I've found all of my outsourced relationships as a referral probably through you, but that's just, you know, that just comes with building that trust and that relationship with one vendor. It opens the door and opens up opportunities for other areas too.
Yeah, the best way to expand is based on somebody's testimony of
absolutely,
you can trust these guys. Like, yeah, I agree. So let's talk a little bit about technology. So one of the things that we've talked about in a couple of these webinars, and I think that we probably all talk about all freaking day, every freaking day, is AI. But AI's claim that like, we're going to replace one team member, right? We're going to accelerate your efficiency by X%. How do you think that technology can support a one-person marketing team?
I think it can really help. Do I think it will ever replace just one person? Definitely not on a one-person marketing team, but I've leveraged AI for content. We just built a new website. I was writing a lot of the web pages, and there were some solution or industry pages where it was just a matter of, you know, changing the industry and getting it more specific to the industry or a different solution. And I leveraged AI really heavily for that. I needed to, you know, review and tweak some of the content, but it saved me hours. So I think it's a single marketer's best friend. Honestly, it's probably second or third best to your outsourced partners. But I definitely see it playing a huge role in our marketing efforts going into 2025.
I'm curious, in addition to content creation, how else are you using AI to kind of support all of the other elements that you have ongoing?
Research, market research, competitor research. Our sales team has been leveraging it a lot for their personal branding and writing LinkedIn posts, which goes back to content. But yeah, I think that it's helped me do more research more efficiently, for sure.
One of the things that I have been using AI for lately and that I think is really valuable for somebody who's managing outsourced partners kind of goes back to the idea that like you're managing people whose technical knowledge is perhaps very different from yours because they are specialists. And one of the new features like in the past 6 months that you can do with like ChatGPT and Claude and stuff is you can upload documents. So one of the things that I've been testing is basically going in and taking like a PDF report or whatever. So whatever ways your partner is reporting to you, your vendor, go in, upload it and say like, interpret this for me, right? Like tell me, are there any inconsistencies in this? Does this make sense? You can go in and upload multiple months reports and say like, hey, pull out the like month over month growth based on these 3 reports and give me kind of a summary of how we're doing. So you can kind of use it to say like some of the raw information that you're getting, or even, the interpreted and curated information that you're getting from your vendor about performance. You can kind of go in and input that into some of these AI tools and interrogate it a little bit, right? And maybe say like, rephrase that. I don't know what that means. And it can be a huge, I think, upskill for you as a manager to kind of say like, okay, I understand now better what I'm looking at here in this report that may be very technical.
Yeah, it'll help me be smarter when I talk.
Upskill it and say be smarter.
Upskill. Yeah, that sounds better.
Skills and intelligence are 2 different things. What do you think, Lauren? Is there anything else that?
Well, I did just use AI to help me interpret a very complex chart that was on like retail. And it was like lots of inflation and like net pricing. I don't know. There were lots of words. I was like, okay, this is super new for me. And this chart was super dense. And I wanted to check to make sure that my analysis of it was correct. So I put it into Perplexity and I was like, okay, tell me what this is. And I had to ask it some follow-up questions, but then we got to the heart of it. And I was like, oh, yes. So then, we got a really clear and cogent analysis out of that. So I think that was really fantastic. I also, just from a content perspective, because that's always where I come, I think, from everything with AI. I really like to use it too when I'm working on content strategies and I built, so like, let's just say a topic cluster. So I do all of my research, go through SEMrush, any Google data that I need to, just regular Googling and reading all that stuff and put it together. I like to ask it like what I'm missing. Like, okay, like are there topics that, hey, I didn't think about, or is there a unique angle that I didn't include here? Or what keyword, here's my keyword list. Now let's add to it so that I can be more intentional. So that helps me get, I think, an even more robust strategy a lot faster, especially from a topic cluster perspective.
Yeah, I think AI too has helped me. The more we're talking about it, the more I'm like, oh yeah, I've used it for this and that too. But like event marketing, like give me a pre-event list of things I should be thinking about. And it'll spit out a list of, 5 things that I'm not an event marketer. I've coordinated trade shows and stuff, but that's not my strong suit. So it's helped me with generating like a plan and a list for that. And also product marketing. We don't have a product marketer on our team. We're working on, launching some new products in 2025, getting a plan together for that, which I can at least use as a starting point and then take to my team or my outsourced vendors and say, okay, this is in general what we want to do. Like, let's fine tune it, tweak it a little bit.
Yeah. I think what you've both mentioned, which I think is super valuable use of AI, is blind spot identification. right? So to say, and you can do that not just with text-based stuff like Lauren described, but numbers and things like that too, right? Like, does this add up? Are we missing anything that would typically be on a report like this? Do you see any concerning trends, right? So, I mean, I think it's a good way too to, I want to say that every vendor in the world can hold themselves accountable, but the reality is there do need to be accountability measures, right? And visibility, and you need to make sure things aren't slipping through the cracks. And, that can be a good way to do it, right? To go in and say, like, I may not understand all of the ins and outs of what this SEO report says, but what is it missing? Does any of it not make sense? Things like that, and kind of use AI to verify or maybe suss out things that you need to see as a leader. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about tracking. So speaking of accountability, right? Like, how do you keep tabs? So you only have so many hours in a day and you're running an entire department. How do you keep tabs on progress and, manage things together?
I mean, I rely heavily on our weekly touch bases, or whatever the cadence is of when I'm touching base with my vendors. And ideally, going forward, I would have maybe more visibility into like whatever project management tool they're using, and I can be part of that, so I can see like where on the list of priorities like each task is falling. And I just try to, be realistic and level set expectations in terms of managing like something that might be very urgent. Also understanding that they have a whole client load and maybe can't get to whatever my need is right away, but let's find like a middle ground and see how we can make both parties happy.
So many more of our clients, I think, are asking for more visibility into project management. So I'm not surprised to hear that, because I do think that's a disconnect with a lot of vendors. It's like we are, as a vendor, I'm either in someone's project management system, or again, we're relying on the calls that we might have or a spreadsheet to delineate priorities and what's happening. And sometimes it's just not good enough, especially when you have so many projects going on, or you're touching many different verticals.
Yep. Yeah, so I think that's what I found as we've expanded like our relationship is we have a lot of Google Docs, a lot of Google Sheets, and if we could condense everything into one place or one project management tool or something that you guys are using that I can get access and visibility to, I think that would just make us more efficient.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times it's just externalizing our own process, right? Because we use ClickUp and we've got everything managed really well, but it's how much of that do we expose to the client and that kind of thing, which I think is also a good accountability measure, right? Mm-hmm. Then you're making sure it's like, we are tracking this, we are paying attention to it. Even one of the things we've made a big transition this year from project-based billing to hourly billing, in part to provide better visibility, right, to clients about value and time, how we're using our time, how we're using our resources and all of that. And it's a good way to reflect back to clients too. Like, hey, I spent 3 hours this week answering emails from you. Mm-hmm. Like, is that the best use of my time? Right. Kind of thing. And that, so I think it's just an important, I think when clients get very comfortable with you, they tend to treat you like a staff member, which is awesome from a familiarity perspective, but can then provide those challenges of what we talked before, like scope creep and balancing, things like that. It's like, well, how do we spend all this time? It's like, well, you asked me for 8 more things, that kind of thing. And it goes faster than they think. So yeah, I think that's a huge, creating a shared understanding of what's being done when it's delivered and what the reasonable timelines are for delivering things. I think all of that is really helpful. Yeah.
My one stressor would be, and because I know this happens all the time, is I know that everyone gets really excited to see their assets and deliverables. So if you are in project management systems, there is a risk that clients go in there when it's not ready yet. And that is concerning to me from like an internal process perspective. So like if it's going through different rounds of editing, we want it to be really polished before we send it off to the client. if you're in a project management system. Of course, I think that's a huge risk that these will be seen.
Great. And I say that I want access to something like that, but will I actually use it? Do I have time to actually actively be in it? Who knows?
Yeah. We don't need you to see how the sausage gets made.
Right.
I mean, you can. Like, I'm happy to have you along.
Debilitating self-doubt before we said something.
Yeah, me rereading the same sentence 5 times, like, okay, right. Yeah, this is fine. Happy to have you along for that.
So no racist check there. Yeah, I think that's important. And I think too, one of the biggest things that we have found is just figuring out a compromise, right? So one of the things that I think is challenging for established marketing leaders who are maybe new to outsourcing or who are not perhaps trained in vendor management is the idea that they can just dictate, right? And I think there's a really big difference between hiring a vendor that is meant to simply be like a fulfillment entity, right? Like we have everything baked. We have the strategy, we have the process, we have all these kind of things, and then we're just going to send out for fulfillment, right? Which is often like what a creative agency would do, right? They would be a little bit more fulfillment oriented versus like what I would say is our relationship, which is a little more of like a strategic partnership, right? Where we're coming in and we're actually building out strategies for you. We are putting together process. We are overseeing all of that. And I think that, it's important to evaluate vendors that way, because I think that even when we've been a part of organizations that have had a leadership change, if the leader who is managing vendors has a very different philosophy about what that vendor's role is, it can be a really hard relationship to
right. And at that point, if you're not really looking to get that strategic direction from your vendors, you might as well hire someone to be internal and just pay them to be like checking things off the list and doing things exactly the way that you want to do them. I feel like the point of a outsourced vendor relationship is to get more value from it and to be a strategic partner. Not that I wouldn't turn down having an extra teammate, but
right. No, I totally agree. And I
think a team of 2, outsourced relationships are still going to be very important and necessary.
Yeah. There's almost no business that's going to really be able to manage marketing, I think, with less than 3-5 people. I can't imagine any size business just because of how much there is to do. Yeah, it can definitely be a challenge. So, I mean, I think if we talked a little bit about like what's the ideal vendor from your perspective, Briana. Lauren, I'm interested in your perspective on like what's the ideal client.
Oh, I love that. So it goes back to what you were saying, Joy, on the type of work you want to be doing. And I think one of the things that sets our team apart at Winsome is our ability to bring the strategy and to bounce ideas off of our clients and really be proactive in that realm. So I prefer working with clients who want to have those kinds of conversations with me, who don't want to cut me out of what they're doing or what they're being held accountable for or their larger business goals. I think sometimes you can get a little bit shy when you do that. You're like, oh, I don't want to share that with the outsourced vendor because they're not on my team. They don't need to know that. But I prefer relationships where I can have access to that kind of stuff because it makes what I'm doing so much richer and so much better. So I would say that is super critical for me. I'm just going to harken back again to what we've been saying, I think, this whole time, is that open communication is just so critical. I love having relationships with clients where we're talking regularly, where we have weekly or bi-weekly calls, and I'm staying involved in what's going on with them. I think it keeps, all of us more engaged, and it's just more fun.
Yeah, I mean, having outsourced teams makes me feel like I have a team and commiserate with them, and it just makes my life easier. I don't feel like I'm, on a marketing island of one at my company.
Yep. I like that. I think that's true. I think that there has to be a mutual understanding. If you move into that strategic partnership, the one thing I will say is like, there has to be a mutual understanding and respect of like, you're hiring somebody with the purpose of letting them influence your strategy. You're hiring somebody who knows more than you about something specific. And so when I have seen it break down is when, I come into an organization, let's say, and we typically come in as like a fractional CMO, fractional leader, or an outsourced partner that's handling strategy and stuff like that. If the marketing director, the CMO, whoever's in leadership at the organization, or even a non-marketer who's in leadership at the organization, if they don't let us influence things, it becomes broken, right? Like if you're hiring us in order to be a strategic voice and then you kind of flip that or like take it under advisement, but don't do what we're telling you to do, it's really hard because it's like, okay, I've been in SEO for a really long time. If you want to go screw around with your website and do something that I know is going to ruin your website traffic, and if I tell you that and you don't listen to me, I can't help you. And it becomes like the most frustrating dynamic because you're just like, I can see the writing on the wall. And I'll tell people, I'll be like, in 6 months, you'll be done. Like, if you do this, because I'm confident enough at this point in my career and I don't want to mess around. So I'll just say it. But I think it's important that like, if you're hiring people who know more than you about something specific, that you listen to them and that you allow them to influence the strategic direction of things. Or to your point, Briana, if you know as much as you want to know about all the things, then just hire somebody to do it for you, right? Then just have a doer. Because I don't think, like you said, I don't think at the rates most agencies charge, you're going to derive as much value as you should if all they're doing is fulfillment. At that point, just hire a freelancer or hire somebody internally.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that we have made leaps and bounds with like our strategy with the help of outsourced vendors. And the longer I've been at Trax and learned more about the industry, the more I can help influence that strategy. So it just keeps like getting better and better. And the longer you work with the vendor, the more that they'll also understand your industry and kind of how to better influence your strategy.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, even what we've been able to do with the Trax website is pretty impressive. And I know we just launched the new website.
It looks so good. It looks so good. I was over the moon when I saw it.
Oh, I am too. I look at it every day. Now my dreams about it are actually good dreams and not nightmares. So it's great.
Launching a new website's like giving birth. I mean, it is not a joke. So high kudos for that. But you think like, I mean, even 3.5, however many years ago that we started on the Trax website to where it is now in terms of ranking, in terms of traffic, like it's been pretty revolutionary, which is amazing. But
yeah, even before we had the new site, like what we were able to accomplish just through like SEO alone and reworking our content strategy is amazing. And there's no way I would have been able to do that myself. Like I needed someone with that expertise to help with that.
Mm-hmm. And you listened, and we did it. All good things. Awesome. All right. Well, I think this was fantastic. Lots of good ideas, lots of good thoughts. Hopefully it's helped people and will continue to help people think about the coming year. Any big priorities for you in 2025 for your department of one? Not being a department of one?
Yeah. Sorry, you kind of cut out. What was your question?
Yeah. Any like priorities for you going into 2025?
Yeah, I think we have a lot now that we have a new website, kind of re-engineering like our lead funnel and how leads come in through our website and getting smarter about like lead scoring, leveraging HubSpot. So kind of like some back end things, but things that will also help make us smarter and provide more visibility into leads that are coming in and being handed off to our sales team, improving that process. And also just continuing to push our content strategy. Now that we have a new website, I would like to get some new videos created, being more efficient with creating content, like leveraging AI, fund plans for that. And also illuminating more of like our leadership and getting them more exposure on social media and on podcasts. We've done a really great job kind of towards the tail end of 2024 with that. So continuing those efforts as well.
Awesome. All right.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for the time. This was fun. Good way to spend lunch.
Yeah.
All right. I will talk to you all soon because we talk all the time. Appreciate it.